Our club has always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas. Here, we offer access to dynamic political, business, and public personalities.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, members and guests. My name is Karen Restuhl, and I'm a director of Canadian Club Toronto and your event host. Welcome to another one of our impressive lineup of club events in this 125th season. First, let me start by acknowledging that we are gathered here both in person and virtually on the territory of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and more recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today's meeting place is within the Treaty of the Dish with One Spoon, a treaty between Indigenous nations that solidified their commitment to share and protect the land and water in a way that considers future generations. Thank you to the hundreds of guests who are joining us virtually. We appreciate you spending time with us. Welcome. And as you watch today's event, please engage with us on social media. Hashtags are on your tables or on your screens. The Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade promotes job creation, innovation, and economic growth, positioning our province as the North American leader in smart cars supports these important enablers, creating jobs, investing in innovative technology, and driving growth. Minister Fedeli will provide details of how his ministry and government are unleashing resources to position Ontario as an economic leader and destination of choice in North America. If you have questions for the minister, please note them on the Q&A cards on your table, and we'll collect them and address them afterwards. For those of you joining remotely, we invite you to hit Submit a Question button on the right side of your screen, and we'll get them to the minister. Andrea Mendel-Campbell, who sits on the board of Crown Realty, a commercial real estate investment company, best-selling author and director, author and director of Canadian Club Toronto, will be joining Minister Fedeli for the Q&A. At this time, I would like to acknowledge today's event sponsors, Bruce Power and Waste Connections of Canada. We appreciate your generous support. And I'd also like to acknowledge Bell Canada for their sponsorship of a youth and young leaders table with students from Ryerson's Leadership Lab and the University of Toronto's Political Science Department. Welcome. The Honourable Vic Fedeli is well suited to his current role. A lifelong entrepreneur, successful businessman, author, and philanthropist, he brings a passion of purpose to the ministerial portfolio. In the economic development, job creation, and trade position, Minister Fedeli is focused on making Ontario top of mind for businesses, cutting red tape, promoting partnerships, and harnessing our talented workforce are key priorities for him. He led the Fedeli Corporation, which was once among the top 50 best places to work in Canada. As the two-term mayor of North Bay, he focused on fiscal prudence and economic development. This area of focus runs quite deep for the minister. Now serving in his third term as MPP for Nipissing, he has been influential in the PC caucus since his election in 2011. Minister, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club Toronto podium over to you.
It's a revolution in Ontario's auto sector. Ontario is becoming a global leader in building the vehicles of the future. We're supporting the biggest investments in Ontario's auto manufacturing history with $12 billion committed by manufacturers. Soon, the next generation of hybrid and electric vehicles will be built here in Ontario by Ontario workers. Ontario will build batteries for the next generation electric vehicles. We'll be a world-leading producer of critical minerals and low-carbon steel. Plants that were closed years ago will be transformed, ready for the vehicles of tomorrow. It will mean thousands of jobs, providing a future for families and communities, fueling dreams and ambitions for generations to come. Millions in research, CO2 emissions reduced by 3 million tons annually. This is how we're driving prosperity. Ontario Auto is back.
I guess you've been able to figure out we're going to talk auto for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And I want to say thank you very much, Karen. It's great to see you in person instead of, that big on a screen. So that's wonderful. I want to say good afternoon, everybody. It's so wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues and former colleagues again. And speaking of former colleagues, I'm not going to introduce anybody, but I am going to say former Minister Charles Sousa, I'm only crapping on you one time in the speech, just to give you a pre-warning, and I am. So thank you to the Canadian Club. I'm not kidding. Thank you to the Canadian Club for hosting today's event and for having this, what I hope is an important discussion with Andrea and I in person. I'm going to talk about you for a second, Andrea, because I know that I can tell you one of my favorite books, everybody that knows me and has ever been in my office knows that I have her book, Why Mexicans Don't Drink Molson. It's an unbelievably important book. It was written in 2007, and it was insightful back then, and it is equally important today, because here we are so many years later, and we still are making the same mistakes. Andrea's point in the book was the fact that at a company like Molson, and she doesn't pick on them particularly, other than in the title, but a company like Molson spills, actually and literally spills more beer than they export. And so it's a really insightful book. If you don't have it, buy it. Now, after softening you up like that, I expect easier treatment later. And I do have to say hello to a dear friend, Lisa Raitt, former MPP. And I know there's more, but that's it. I'm not introducing anybody else in the audience. Look, what we've done in the auto sector is so exciting. We're just going to jump right into it. Ontario is building. In fact, we're actually rebuilding our economy, and we call it Unleashing Ontario. Through the last 2 years of the pandemic, there has been a massive groundswell building up in Ontario. Momentum in our world-class auto manufacturing sector, up and down every single part of the entire supply chain. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that our province is in the midst of an automotive renaissance. This major boom in Ontario's auto sector, with billions of dollars in industry investment flooding into the province, truly does feel like we're moving into the renaissance from the dark ages. And it's easy to forget where we were just a few years ago. Ontario's auto sector has had a long and storied history of excellence, driving the economic engine of Canada and establishing Ontario as one of North America's premier auto hubs for generations. Along the 800-kilometer corridor that stretches from Detroit to Ottawa lies the richest concentration of auto-related resources anywhere in the world. We're the only subnational with 5 OEMs and rank second only to Michigan for North American vehicle production. Ontario is home to a unique ecosystem of world-leading vehicle assemblers, robust and resilient supply chain, research centers that have been meeting the needs of international customers for more than 100 years. With the second largest tech sector in North America and a renowned engineering talent pool, the expertise of Ontario's automotive cluster spans from proof of concept to production line automation systems to global logistics tracking software. But despite all of this, over the past decade, we saw a serious downturn taking place in our auto sector. So I'm going to set the table, and we're going to put the record out there. Charles. The previous government declared in their what turned out to be final long-term economic report on the economy, their desire was that, quote, the structure of the Ontario economy will continue to shift from goods producing to service producing sectors and, quote, shifting employment from goods producing industries, in particular manufacturing, to service sector industries. So this transition away from traditional industries was coupled with the fact that Ontario's business climate was becoming inhospitable for automakers looking to grow and invest Ontario. So don't take my word for it. Let's listen. Former Premier Kathleen Wynne was on a stage in Windsor with Sergio Marchionne, we all know was the then chair of then named Fiat Chrysler. She asked whether Chrysler was going to expand in Windsor, and I will tell you, he was shocked as Chrysler, along with every other Ontario car plant, were scaling down at that time. And he stated right there on the stage the nub of the problem. He said, quote, this is not what I would call the cheapest jurisdiction. And then he told her, quote, I think you need to create the conditions to become competitive. And that really was the nub. And so recall that since 2003, Ontario's share of the auto assembly, that's the end of the bad news, Charles. The end of the auto assembly in North America, we had shrunk from 17% down to 12%. Mexico had attracted more than 15 times the greenfield auto investment than Ontario. And when it came to electric vehicle production, Ontario had not seen one single dollar of more than $300 billion invested globally. Not a penny came here. So when we took office in 2018, Premier Ford knew that one of the biggest challenges was to make Ontario, as he would say, open for business. And so we listened to what Sergio had to say. It was essential to bring our auto sector back from the brink, and Premier Ford got to work right away. In a very short period of time, as many of you in this room know, we reduced the cost of doing business by $7 billion a year, each and every year, going forward as well. And that isn't just some notional number. Here's some examples. WSIB premiums have been lowered in Ontario by 50%. That's an annual saving to business of $2.5 billion. And there's no reduction in benefits. We put in an accelerated capital cost allowance, much like the US had. That was introduced, and that allows companies to write off their new equipment in year. That is $1 billion in annual savings delivered. The red tape and burden reduction program that we have introduced 8 times now, 8 bills, they've generated over $400 million in annual savings. We reduced commercial and industrial hydro rates by 15% on average. And we lowered the provincial share of your local property taxes by $450 million every year. That is, add it all together, that is $7 billion in annual savings. That's the magic number that the auto sector needed to hear. But so did everybody else, because in the first 2 years in office, 300,000 jobs were created. All that is before the pandemic. Now, think about this number that you may or may not know. Since the pandemic, Ontario has seen a further 200,000 net new jobs created. There are 500,000 women and men that went to work this morning more than went to work before our government got elected. 500,000. The even better news is that all of those fundamentals of the $7 billion, they're all still in place. And they are why Ontario is seeing continued domestic growth, continued foreign direct investment, all throughout the pandemic. So, as the Premier would be quick to tell you, it took a lot of shoe leather and a lot of elbow grease. We both like to mix our metaphors when it comes to that. But I can tell you, alongside the Premier, we continued to send the message that Ontario is the best jurisdiction for major auto manufacturers looking to make a winning investment. And so over the past 17 months, we have seen a streak of incredible auto investments, the likes of which Ontario and Canada have never, ever seen. We'll get back to that in a minute. In addition to making it easier to do business here again, we set out a plan, a vision, and a commitment for the future of the auto sector, especially in the transition to electric vehicle and EV production. Premier Ford announced Driving Prosperity. This was a 10-year plan that set the foundation for growth in Ontario's auto sector, for its workers, its families, all the communities that it supports. And we all know that the global auto industry is being reinvented around electric and autonomous vehicles. Well, Driving Prosperity is supporting the sector to help them pivot to manufacturing electric vehicles, the batteries those vehicles need, and filling the entire supply chain with Ontario-made components. And it's anchored by the objective to maintain and grow Ontario's auto sector by building at least 400,000 electric and hybrid vehicles by 2030. That's the goal. And so we're preparing with the auto sector to achieve 4 pieces of this. Number one is we're repositioning the vehicle and parts production for the car of the future. We call that Ontario Automotive Manufacturing Program, OAMP, and that's a big part of this. We have another program to establish and support an electric battery supply chain ecosystem, and that's where our critical minerals strategy comes in. The third is to innovate in every stage of development, and that's where OVIN, the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, plays, and to invest in the province's auto workers. That's the key. So our plan will strengthen the links between those ecosystems, creating a comprehensive and world-class supply chain that really is truly greater than the sum of all of its parts. So let's take just a moment to touch on each of these. So we're investing an additional $12 million in auto parts companies through the next phase of OAMP. This is where we support the 700 auto parts companies, the 500 tool and die and mold makers. We are helping them pivot to the EV market from their internal combustion engine market. OAMP is also helping these companies seize the growth opportunities. You know, we saw NAFTA 2.0, as I call it, USMCA. There is an important North American content requirement. This is helping them learn of the opportunities. OAMP right now, we have 100 OAMP projects out there, already underway, creating 613 jobs, and our investment so far has leveraged $22.2 million from the industry. From parts, we moved to developing the technologies, and that's where our investment of $56.4 million to launch OVIN, the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. That's our flagship initiative to accelerate research and development right across the province in electric, low carbon, and connected and autonomous vehicle technologies. Thank you, Rod, for your excellent work, and Claudia for your superior work on those files. By 2030, 1 out of every 3 passenger vehicles sold globally will be electric. By 2040, 75% of new vehicles sold in Ontario will be autonomous. And by 2050, the autonomous and connected cars could contribute up to $7 trillion to the global economy. So OVEN will support and rally Ontario's world-class talent, the supply chains, the innovators, the startups, the SMEs, the global leaders, to meet that rising demand for clean, smart, sustainable transportation technologies and infrastructure. So now we get to one of the most exciting frontiers for producing EVs here in Ontario, and of course that's the critical minerals. For a North Bay boy, this is so important. You need critical minerals to create batteries, and Canada is the only country in the entire Western Hemisphere with every single raw material required to make a lithium-ion battery. We have nickel, lithium, graphite, cobalt. In fact, in the aptly named town of Cobalt, Ontario, it is the home to the only permitted processing facility in North America. And that means, for the very first time in 120 years, Northern Ontario will be part of the lucrative auto sector. And that is just music to the ears of us Northerners. To support the development of these minerals, we were just at a palladium mine outside of Thunder Bay where the Premier announced the Critical Minerals Strategy. And this is a $24 million investment, including $5 million for a new Critical Minerals Innovation Fund that will support the research for extraction and processing of those minerals in the north, another first. So just to shift, since Ontario does not generate any electricity from burning coal, we are the #1 clean tech cluster in the country, offering the cleanest energy mix of any auto jurisdiction in North America. We produce 94% emission-free electricity, and that's a very key factor for auto and battery companies looking to achieve their own sustainability goals. When people buy, and this is something the States hasn't figured out yet, when people buy an electric vehicle, they are expecting a green vehicle. They expect a car to be assembled using clean energy. The same for the battery and the same for the components, with steel being a major component. And that led us to make a $500 million investment in ArcelorMittal Dofasco's green steel project in Hamilton. Premier was there to announce that their plant will be the first in Dofasco's global operations to replace coal furnaces with an electric arc furnace. 40% of the steel from that plant goes into the auto sector. So the bottom line is this: if the car of the future is going to be electric, then its steel must be made from an electric source as well. That's the difference between us and the US. In addition, the reduction of CO2 emissions from this one project alone, incidentally, amounts to roughly 3 million tons every year. That's equal to taking 1 million cars off the road. So now you're starting to get a picture of this whole supply chain taking shape. We have everything here, from the critical minerals in Northern Ontario to produce EV batteries, to the emerging technologies coming out of tech clusters in Ottawa, GTA, KW region, to the parts manufacturers all through southwestern Ontario, including the GTA, to the green steel in Hamilton. See, it's all coming together. The automakers and the battery makers took notice of this ecosystem. They took notice of driving prosperity. Remember the earlier comment I made, that over the past 17 months, we've seen a streak of incredible auto investments, the likes of which Ontario has never seen. Well, that streak equals $12 billion as of this morning in new auto industry investments in hybrid and electric vehicle production at Ontario assembly months. $12 billion in 17 months. Yeah, that is. You're business people. Just think of this for a moment. Just think of the thrill of the chase with the Premier negotiating these deals across the boardroom tables, signing $12 billion worth of deals, and then go home at night, put your head on the pillow, and think about those thousands of women and men who woke up this morning to go to a new job in Oshawa at that auto plant that was not there last year or the year before. And just think of the hope that it brings to them and their families. So let's just take a moment and add up some of these wins. It started with Ford, where they announced a $1.8 billion investment to transform their Oakville assembly complex into a global hub for EV production. And that investment includes the production of 5 new electric vehicle models, securing employment for over 3,300 workers. I see Brian smiling over here. Of course you are. This is beautiful. General Motors invested more than $2 billion to transform their company's Oshawa and Ingersoll plants. This saw GM's storied return to Oshawa with 2,600 jobs, 3 shifts, and the creation in Ingersoll of the first full-scale electric vehicle production facility in Canada. Stellantis announced it will invest $1.9 billion to upgrade their assembly plant in Windsor to build electric vehicles. Up the highway, Honda, with a $1.4 billion investment to retool their Alliston plant and launch their next-gen hybrid versions, securing thousands of jobs for the future. All of these followed Toyota and their earlier $1.4 billion investment to upgrade their Cambridge and Woodstock facilities, where a couple of years ago we watched their RAV4 and Lexus NX cars roll off the assembly line for the first time. We talked about Dofasco earlier. They're making a $1.8 billion investment in their electric arc furnace to move them off coal and produce the green steel, as we mentioned. And then came the biggest auto investment in our country's history. LG Energy Systems from Korea and Stellantis joined forces to build Ontario's first large-scale EV battery manufacturing plant in Windsor. It's a $5 billion investment which will create 2,500 brand new jobs in the city of Windsor. Yeah. It will be a 4.5 million square foot building, the size of 112 hockey arenas. So think of the thousands of men and women who will be employed there for the next 2 years. That's it, just to build this gigafactory. So all of this together puts Ontario on the path to becoming one of the most vertically integrated automotive jurisdictions in the emerging North American EV market. But I will tell you right now, a little secret between us, we're not done yet. We still might have 1 or 2 tricks up our sleeve in the next week or 2. It's just so exciting for all of us. I tell you, every day when I talk to somebody, I just tell them, our government, we're all in. We're sliding all our chips on the table. We are all in on electric vehicles. We're investing up and down, as I said, the entire supply chain, every bit of it, in every corner of the province. And that means securing the future for thousands of workers and their families all across Ontario. So I hope that you are as excited about the future as we are. We've always been the manufacturing engine of Canada, and that engine will drive us to becoming the premier auto manufacturing destination in North America. I will close with a thank you to all of the people who were involved in all of these deals, the Premier and his office, Medjkat Giles, who was my deputy minister for so long, and his incredibly talented team, my team on the political side and the policy side, all of the automakers, all of the associations, all of the stakeholders who really spent a lot of time with the Premier, myself, taking us through these plans and educating us, showing us the future, showing us where we need to be, and we showed them back, driving prosperity, our plan to get us there. So we've seen the incredible might firsthand of the workers in the industries, the resources, the innovation, and none of that can be constrained, and that's what we mean when we say unleashing Ontario. Thank you. Can I talk about your book some more? Is that going to help me?
No, we're here to talk about you. Thank you so much for joining us, Minister. And I have to say, I think on behalf of everybody here, you know, this has been a really tough 2 years, I think, for everyone. And the fact that you and the government have been able to accomplish so much, considering we were all just trying to keep it together for the last 2 years, thank you for that. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you some hard questions. All right, you know, it really is a testament, the amount of investment that you have been able to achieve. And from what I gather, I tried to get the information out of you earlier. You're not giving it up, but there's more to come. So here's my question. You're thinking about it in a holistic way, which I think is very important. But at the end of the day, we still need to sell these vehicles into a bigger market because, you know, we're not, you know, population-wise, we're not huge. So that means the United States. And we do know that, you know, Joe Biden has a pretty protectionist view of the world, and, you know, he's really pushing a Buy America EV policy. So how are you thinking about that, and how concerned are you about that?
Well, it's disappointing, I would say, first of all, that they are looking at various policies that are restrictive. The Premier led a mission to Washington just a few weeks ago, met with trade representatives, met with commerce representatives, and was very clear that we have a wonderful trading partner. We do $400 billion a year in two-way trade. There's more than $1 billion a day that goes back and forth over our border. I think he was very clear in outlining that we are the #1 trading partner to 19 US states, the #2 trading partner to 9 more. We continue to tell everyone who will listen that 9 million Americans wake up every morning to go to a job just to make something to ship to Canada. I use Ohio as an example. There's 300,000 people in Ohio. That's all they do is make things for Canada. So when you talk Buy America, you are missing the bigger picture. You are missing the Buy North America plan, and that's the wording that we use, Buy North America. We just finished the successful negotiations for what I call NAFTA 2.0, and this would be absolutely in reverse and in opposite direction of the deal that was just signed on NAFTA. So we would expect the federal government to continue to push the Americans to honor the deal that they just signed. But in the meantime, it's our job to continue telling the Americans exactly why we're such valued partners to each other. I know the Premier speaks with the governors on a regular basis. From our area, whenever we see articles in magazines where somebody, whether it's a senator or a member of Congress talking about the Buy America in their state, they get a letter from us that's very detailed about their own particular state and how many people are employed just to make things for us. So we are very active on the file, and the Premier's taking a leading role in that.
Okay, so how optimistic are you that we can get this put aside and shelved?
So at the moment, with the midterms coming up and with Senator Manchin being the holdout on the Build Back Better program, I won't say we'll breathe a sigh of relief. We have a new window of opportunity to continue to make our case. And now that travel has opened up a little bit more, we can continue to develop our pull out every one of those strings that we have in front of us. But I think we've got a little tiny breathing space, but it's not going away.
Okay. Talking about the critical minerals theory, now the federal, Ottawa also, as part of the federal budget, they've announced, I think it's a close to $4 billion plan, a critical mineral strategy. How does Ontario and the federal government's strategies work together?
I think they are going to work very well together. We're very pleased that they're acknowledging the importance of critical minerals. I'll go back to that trip with the Premier to Washington just a few weeks ago for a moment. So it's funny, you know, only a few weeks before that, President Biden announced the Americans' critical minerals strategy. I'm not sure anybody kind of mentioned you don't mine many things here. You only have one nickel mine in the entire US of A, and you really do need the critical minerals that are north of the 49th. And so seeing the federal government doing in parallel what we're doing, I think is important. So it's not just about mining those critical minerals. There's 33 critical minerals in Ontario, but as I mentioned earlier, the nickel in Sudbury primarily, and there's huge nickel finds around Timmins, just north of Timmins and south of Timmins, and those are expected to be even, if you believe the market so far, larger than the Sudbury Basin. Then there's the Ring of Fire. You know, it was always a chromite play. I don't have to tell many of you here, it was a chromite play. But today, the nickel that's there, the known nickel there, is far more easier to get at, far more easier to manage, and far more valuable today. Nickel went from, you know, $4 to $7 a pound to $22 to $27 a pound, and it's strong because of the EV market. Everybody scratched their head and figured out, wow, we need a lot of nickel for this thing, when you think of the weight of the batteries and how much minerals. So it's not just about extracting the minerals. That's a big part of both the federal and the provincial program, but it's going to be about the processing. You know, pulling that nickel out of the ground and shipping it overseas to be processed, that is what we want to stop from happening.
That was my next question.
Ask away.
Because at the end of the day, we really don't have a lot of processing in Canada or Ontario. You know, Sudbury is where most of it is, but, you know, Glencore is sending most of it back to Europe. Vale sends part of it back to Europe. And to build new plants, I mean, that's a big undertaking, and we're talking years and years here. So, you know, there's the strategy and then there's the actual execution. So how are you really thinking about this in terms of really ensuring, you know, the oil sands in Alberta could never figure out the processing. So what makes this different?
Well, we've got a good history. We're in the north. You know, we're tired, I'll be quite frank. We're very tired of being the hewers of wood and the haulers of water. We want the value added in the north. We're tired. We're tired of extracting those minerals and watching them take the Ontario Northland train and then getting on a ship and then being sent overseas, coming back as, you know, your ring. We've got to stop this. So there's a passion, but there's the know-how in the north as well. We saw Xstrata in Timmins for years when they were Xstrata. We have the technology. We know how to do it, especially in the Thunder Bay and Northwestern region for processing lithium. There are great opportunities for them to do it there. The population is there. The Great Lakes are there. The rail is there. We need the money and the investment. And quite frankly, we've got to be careful where the sources of that initial investment comes from if we want to protect that. We don't want to wake up one morning and find out that we don't have access to our own minerals anymore or our own cars.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that we do a Newfoundland and we say, as I love Boise's Bay, and we say, you want to pull it out of the ground, you got to process it here?
I would think there's a lot of steps before that we can take with the mining companies. I really believe that they want to do it. They know their market is right here too. They know. that with all of the investments that we're making in the electric vehicle battery plants, plural, which I hope happens. Today it's singular. We have one battery plant, but we're working hard with a couple more. I don't expect those to happen overnight, but that's our goal. We're working on assembling land. We're working hard to that. I don't mind saying that in front of everybody, that's our goal, is to have more than one, right? We're working hard with the auto manufacturers, but it's really the battery plants. So the market is there for the raw materials. You know, shipping it all the way there to ship it all the way back, how does that make a green vehicle? So if we're really into the greenness of the vehicle, you can't be making a battery in Kentucky. They use 3% green energy, but they're making batteries in Kentucky, by the way. You can't make a battery in Indiana because it's 7% green energy, but they're making batteries in Indiana.
All right, I have two questions for you. Last two questions. First is from the audience, which is, you know, it's a really good question around automation and the fact that, you know, it is the rise of the robots. So when we're seeing this happening in the auto sector, are the jobs not vulnerable to increased automation? And how do we prepare these plants to go from producing cars to producing the machine tech that will make the cars?
So I was at a Tesla facility in Ontario where they make the machines that make the batteries. And they build the entire machine. It's the length of, I don't know how many football fields it would be. And then they pack it all up and ship it to California. So it's fascinating. You know, one of our comments to them is maybe one of those plants could stay here in Ontario, of course. But the point is we are in Ontario because not only are we the number one or the number two automaker in North America, we're also the number two tech cluster in all of North America, just behind Silicon Valley. So those jobs, those tech jobs, are translating into the manufacturing of the machines and the manufacturing of those robots. In Cambridge, in Barrie, and in many, many other communities, we are making the machines that are making products. So that's how we're supplementing. That's how we're getting there. You know, when we look at, let's say, something like the PPE nitrile gloves as an example, you know, they're all made in Malaysia because it needs, you know, a ton of people. They're low paid, poor environmental conditions, poor working conditions, but we buy cheap gloves. If we're ever going to do that here, we need to have technology and very few people. That's what will happen. That's just an example.
All right, so one last question before we wrap up. I can't let you go without asking you about the federal budget. You know, we've seen an amazing amount of coverage over the last little while. CEOs like from RBC coming out in public, which is so un-Canadian, to really express their frustration and concern about the long-term economic prospects for this country. We're, I think, dead last according to the OECD forecasts. This federal budget comes out, it's been described by a number of economists as a tax, spend, and pray budget with you know, a lot of big ticket items. I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts, to the degree you can be candid with us, about that budget and your concerns about our long-term economic prosperity.
Well, two or three things for sure. Number one, our job as the provincial government representatives is to make sure that once a budget is out and passed, that we get our provincial fair share for housing and for health care. And I don't think we're there yet on either of those two. We've got a lot of work to convince the federal government we're over here and we have 40% of the population. So I think that's my biggest issue with the budget, is that we make sure that we're attended to properly. Healthcare has not been right. Getting an immigration deal that's the same as Quebec gets would be a good starting point as well, although it wasn't addressed in the budget. You know, we have, every time we get our immigrants, they all have to be in certain silos to the federal government. Quebec, they get the same number, but they can do what they want. And it makes it's not a level playing field with Quebec. And then, of course, there's equalization. Ontario is a net contributor to the federal government of about $12 billion a year. Quebec, who at the time that this was negotiated, had a balanced budget. They were a net recipient of $13 billion a year. So every time we go after a company, we've got a delta of $25 billion already in their favor. So these are the kind of inequities that need to end, and that's the kind of things that we continue to push for. You know, our real GDP is up 6.7%. Many would say that we are in the economic recovery. Certainly we are in Ontario. We're leading the nation in job creation. If you look at the US, they're underwater yet. UK, very underwater yet in jobs. Canada, we're above. Well, why? Ontario. We have 500,000 new jobs in our 4 years, 200,000 of them, as I mentioned earlier. It's more than 200,000, actually, just since the pandemic. So we will continue to do what we are doing with our life sciences strategy, our critical mineral strategy, this brilliant driving prosperity that is everything we said it would be. I mean, 12 billion signed so far. More to come.
Okay, so you're feeling good then.
I'm feeling good about Ontario. I can tell you that the 100,000 men and women who still are working in the auto sector alone, you know, they're feeling pretty good. The 2,500 who are going to be hired in Windsor at the battery plant, I think they're feeling pretty good. The 2,600 who are hired in Oshawa, that closed down plant that has been rebuilt in their fastest time ever to build an auto plant, 1 year from the day they announced to the day the first Chevy Silverado rolled off, they're feeling pretty good. You know, we have work to do. Don't get me wrong. Like, we have a lot of work to do. Let's be candid about that. There's work to do. There's always work to do, and we have a lot. But we are solidly feeling the positive upswing, especially because of the policies that we put in place. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens with leadership.
Well, listen, Minister, I want to say thank you so much for coming here today and being with us, and also for your service. We know how hard you work. We know the long hours you work, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you very much.
It's all good. Let's update your book together one day if you'd let me. I'd love to.
When you have time.
I'd love to offer insights from the trade minister aspect.
You'd have a lot to share.
Thanks, everybody. It was great to see so many friends and familiar faces again.
Thanks so much, Minister Fedeli. On behalf of Canadian Club Toronto, thank you for your inspiring message shared with conviction and passion. It's clear that you are a fantastic ambassador for the province of Ontario. Thank you very much. Your government's commitment to supporting the auto industry sends a hopeful signal to businesses, workers, and entrepreneurs. We should all be proud that Ontario continues to attract investors and economic partners who want to prosper here. We wish you continued success as you continue to unleash your leadership and expertise on our behalf. And thank you, Andrea, for your very thoughtful questions and taking us through the an interesting conversation. You always bring out the best in our guests, so thanks again. Before we close, we would like to extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors, Bruce Power and Waste Connections of Canada. And let me take this opportunity to invite you all to join us for some upcoming events. Tomorrow, Wednesday, April 13th, we welcome Brookfield Asset Management's Managing Partner and Chief Investment Officer, Sachin Shah. On Wednesday of next week, we have the Chairman and CEO of Canada Goose, Danny Rees. And on Thursday, April 21st, we host Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada. Let me conclude by thanking our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications and LiveMeeting.ca for making it possible for us to gather both physically and virtually. And to everyone in the room, thank you for being with us. To those of you connected virtually, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your continued engagement with the club. Take care and stay safe, everyone.